brave girl dreams this 6 times in a row and has a terrifying message. The scream that shattered our quiet suburban night wasn't an ordinary one. It was my daughter Lily's voice, but something about it chilled me to my core. Racing up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time, I burst into her room to find her sitting upright in bed, her small frame rigid, eyes fixed on something in the darkest corner. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "he's here." The room felt impossibly cold. Her favorite stuffed bear lay torn on the floor, and on her bedside table her children's Bible had fallen open to Revelations. That was the night everything changed, the night my 10-year-old daughter first met the Antichrist in her dreams. If this terrifying opening has sent chills down your spine and awakened your curiosity about what happens next, join our community of believers by subscribing. Uncover the dark prophecies and supernatural mysteries that await in this haunting tale of faith, family, and ultimate evil. Before that fateful night, we were what anyone would call a perfect Christian family. Sarah, my beloved wife, Lily, and I lived in a modest 2-story house in Cedar Grove, a quiet suburb where everyone knew each other through Sunday church services. Sarah was the heart of our family, a dedicated mother, talented choir director at First Baptist Church, and a kindergarten teacher beloved by the entire community. We met in college during a mission trip to Guatemala, fell in love over shared prayers and devotion to service, and married right after graduation. Lily came along 3 years later, inheriting her mother's golden hair, gentle spirit, and unwavering faith. Our life was blessed, centered around church activities, community service, and family devotions every evening. But God's plans aren't always what we expect. 6 months ago, Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. Despite our prayers, despite the entire congregation's support, despite Lily's innocent belief that Mommy will be okay because Jesus will heal her, Sarah slipped away from us one quiet Sunday morning. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. She passed during church service time when our family had always felt closest to God. Her death shook my faith to its core. How could a loving God take such a devoted servant, leaving a 10-year-old girl without her mother? I maintained appearances for Lily's sake, still attending church, still saying grace before meals, but inside, my heart hardened with each passing day. I went through the motions, but the warmth of belief had grown cold. Lily, however, remained steadfast. Even after losing her mother, she never questioned her faith. She continued saying her prayers every night, reading her children's Bible, and telling everyone that Mommy is singing with angels now. Her Sunday school teachers often remarked how she comforted other children who were sad, telling them about Jesus' love and her certainty that her mother was watching over her from heaven. But trying to be both mother and father to a grieving child while wrestling with my own crisis of faith took its toll. I threw myself into my work as an insurance adjuster, often bringing files home to review after Lily went to bed. Our neighbors, especially Martha from next door and Tom from across the street, helped with childcare when they could. Pastor James became a regular visitor, checking on us weekly, but I could barely meet his eyes during his prayers for our family. The hardest moments were when Lily would ask questions about her mother. Does Mommy see me when I'm sleeping? Can Mommy hear when I pray to her? Will Mommy be sad that I'm using her favorite coffee mug for my hot chocolate? Each question was like a knife to my heart, especially because Sarah had always known exactly how to answer Lily's spiritual questions with the perfect blend of faith and gentle wisdom. We developed new routines. Every Saturday we visited Sarah's grave, bringing fresh flowers and spending time telling her about our week. Lily would sing hymns, her mother's favorite activity, while I sat in silence, memories of Sarah's voice in the church choir echoing in my mind. On Sundays we still attended church, though I couldn't bring myself to sing the hymns anymore. Lily joined the children's choir, insisting it made her feel closer to her mother. I thought we were coping as well as could be expected. Lily's teacher said she was adjusting normally, though she had become more quiet and introspective. She still maintained her straight A's, still participated in church youth activities, still smiled that sweet smile that was so like her mother's. But looking back now, I wonder if I missed the signs. The way she started sleeping with her lights on, how she began checking her closet before bed, her increasing reluctance to be alone in any room of the house. Were these just normal reactions to losing a parent, or was something darker already taking root in my daughter's innocent soul? If only I had known then what was coming. If only I had recognized that our tragedy had made us vulnerable to something ancient and evil. If only I had kept my faith as strong as my little girl had kept hers. But then again, maybe that's exactly why it chose her. Our daily routine had settled into a careful rhythm in the months following Sarah's death. Each morning began with Lily's unwavering ritual. She would kiss her mother's photo on her nightstand and whisper, "Good morning, Mommy." I'd hear her small feet padding down the hallway to the bathroom, where she'd hum hymns while brushing her teeth, just as Sarah had taught her. Breakfast was always at 7:15 sharp. Lily insisted on saying grace, her small hands clasped tightly, eyes squeezed shut in concentration. "Dear Jesus, thank you for our food. Please bless Daddy and give Mommy a hug in heaven." Those words never failed to bring a lump to my throat, though I tried to hide it behind my coffee cup. I'd drive her to Cedar Grove Elementary, where she was in 5th grade with Mrs. Henderson, who had also taught Sarah 20 years ago. Lily excelled in her studies, particularly in literature and art. Her drawings often featured angels and golden staircases to heaven, her interpretation of where her mother now lived. The school counselor assured me this was her way of processing grief, but something about those drawings always seemed more haunting than comforting. After school, Lily would attend various church activities: youth choir on Mondays, Bible study for kids on Wednesdays, and community service projects on Thursdays. She threw herself into these activities with an almost desperate enthusiasm, as if trying to maintain her connection to Sarah through their shared faith. I watched from the sidelines, helping where I could, but feeling increasingly disconnected from the spiritual comfort she seemed to find. Our evenings followed a strict pattern. Dinner at 6:30, homework until 8, then our nightly ritual of reading together. While most kids her age had moved on to popular young adult novels, Lily insisted on reading her mother's worn Bible, the margins filled with Sarah's elegant handwriting. She'd trace the notes with her finger, something both sweet and unsettling in her intense focus on her mother's words. Bedtime was at 9, preceded by prayers. Lily had expanded her nighttime prayers significantly since Sarah's passing. She would pray for everyone by name: her teachers, her friends, the church congregation, even our elderly neighbors. But lately I'd noticed her adding strange requests: "Please protect us from the darkness," or "Keep the bad dreams away." Weekends were the hardest. Saturday mornings, which used to be filled with Sarah's pancakes and family devotional time, now felt empty despite my best efforts. I'd try to recreate Sarah's recipe, but Lily would just push the food around her plate, saying softly, "It's okay, Daddy. They're different." But still good, her kindness in these moments was almost more than I could bear. Our participation in church life continued, though my heart wasn't in it. Pastor James would often invite us to Sunday lunch after service, his wife Rebecca trying to fill the maternal void in Lily's life. They had no children of their own, and I sometimes caught them watching Lily with a mixture of love and something else. Was it concern? Fear? At the time I dismissed it as my imagination. The community rallied around us in their way. Casseroles appeared regularly on our doorstep, and there was always someone offering to watch Lily if I needed to work late. But there was also the whispered concern about how quickly I'd return to work, the sidelong glances when I skipped Wednesday night prayer meeting, the well-meaning but painful questions about whether I'd considered joining the church's grief support group. Through it all, Lily remained my anchor to sanity. Her faith, so pure and unshaken, both inspired and terrified me. How could someone so young bear such loss with such grace? She'd often find me staring at Sarah's photos late at night and would simply slip her small hand into mine, saying, "Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad, Daddy. She's watching over us." If I had known then that these quiet, grief-filled days were about to give way to something far darker, would I have done anything differently? Would I have paid more attention to the shadows that seemed to linger in the corners of our home, or the way Lily had started singing hymns in her sleep? Perhaps some warnings can only be recognized in hindsight. The first nightmare came on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday night in October. I had just finished reviewing insurance claims when Lily's scream pierced the quiet house. This wasn't her usual bad dream cry. This was primal, filled with pure terror. By the time I reached her room, the temperature had dropped so drastically I could see my breath. Lily sat rigid in her bed, her blue eyes wide and unfocused, staring at the corner where her mother's old rocking chair stood empty. "He was here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The man with the changing face." Her small hands clutched her stuffed bear so tightly her knuckles had turned white. When I tried to touch her, she flinched, something she'd never done before. "What man, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Her response chilled me more than the inexplicable cold. "He said his name is the Antichrist," she whispered. "He showed me things, Daddy, terrible things. He said he's been watching me since Mommy died." I tried to rationalize that she must have overheard something at church, or maybe caught a glimpse of a religious program on TV, but as I held her trembling body, something felt different, wrong. The room's temperature continued to drop, and her beloved children's Bible had fallen from its shelf, landing open to Revelations. The next morning, Lily wasn't herself. The usual morning ritual of kissing her mother's photo turned into a 20-minute ordeal, with her repeatedly checking that the picture frame was perfectly aligned. During breakfast, she wouldn't touch her food until she'd prayed 3 times, each prayer growing more desperate than the last. At school drop-off, she clung to me with unusual force. "Don't let him take me, Daddy," she pleaded. When I asked who she meant, she just shook her head and held me tighter. "Mrs. Henderson called that afternoon to report that Lily had spent most of the day drawing disturbing images, dark figures with shifting faces, crowds of people screaming, and what appeared to be a throne made of writhing bodies. That evening during her bath, I noticed strange marks on her arms like bruises, but in patterns that looked almost like handprints. When I asked about them, she started crying uncontrollably. "He touches me in my dreams," she sobbed. "He says he's marking me as his. I photographed the marks, intending to show them to her pediatrician, but when I checked the photos later, they showed nothing but her perfect, unmarked skin." During prayers that night, Lily insisted on reciting the Lord's Prayer in Latin, something she'd never learned. When I asked where she'd picked it up, she looked at me with confusion. "The lady in white taught me," she said matter-of-factly. "She stands behind you sometimes, Daddy. She's trying to warn us." I called Pastor James that night after Lily finally fell asleep. As I described the events, his usual warm, reassuring tone gave way to something more urgent. "Stay with her tonight, John," he said. "Don't leave her alone. I'll come first thing in the morning. And John, check your Bible. See if anything's changed." I thought his last request odd, but I went to our family Bible anyway. What I found made my blood run cold. Every reference to the Antichrist had been underlined in what looked like fresh ink. But it wasn't ink at all. When I touched it, my fingers came away red. Through it all, I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Grief can do strange things to a child's mind. The temperature drop could be explained by a faulty heating system. The marks on her arms must have been tricks of the light. The Bible. Well, I had no explanation for that. But as I sat in Lily's room that night watching her sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. The air felt charged, as if we were in the calm before a massive storm. Lily whimpered in her sleep, and I heard her whisper words that made no sense, names and phrases in languages I didn't recognize. Just before dawn, she sat up suddenly, eyes still closed, and said in a voice that wasn't quite her own, "He says, this is just the beginning, Daddy. He says I'm special. He says I'm going to help him build his throne." The changes in our daily life were both subtle and dramatic. Within days of Lily's first nightmare, our carefully constructed routine began to unravel. The morning prayers that once brought her comfort now became marathon sessions of desperate pleading. She wouldn't leave for school until she'd recited specific Bible verses 7 times, her small voice growing more frantic with each repetition. At Cedar Grove Elementary, Lily's transformation was impossible to ignore. Her straight-A performance plummeted. Mrs. Henderson reported that she would spend entire lessons staring at empty corners of the classroom, muttering under her breath. During recess, she stopped playing with her friends and instead stood alone by the fence, singing hymns in that strange Latin she supposedly never learned. The other parents started to notice. I'd catch them whispering at pickup time, their conversations dying as I approached. Some pulled their children away when Lily walked past. Only Sarah Mitchell, her best friend since kindergarten, stayed loyal, though even she seemed unsettled by Lily's new behaviors. "She keeps talking about a throne made of people," Sarah's mother told me hesitantly one afternoon. And she told Sarah that her mom was chosen to be part of it. Pastor James became a regular visitor, coming by every evening to pray with us. I noticed how he'd watch Lily during these sessions, his expression growing more troubled each time. After one particularly intense prayer meeting where Lily had spoken in what he identified as ancient Aramaic, he pulled me aside. "John," he said gravely, "this is beyond simple grief. I've seen this before, and we need to act quickly." The nights became a battlefield. Lily refused to sleep without every light in the house blazing. She surrounded her bed with her mother's religious items, crosses, prayer books, her favorite Bible. But nothing seemed to keep the nightmares at bay. Each night I'd wake to her screams, running to find her in various states of terror, sometimes speaking in tongues, sometimes carrying on conversations with invisible entities, sometimes crying about the throne of souls she was being forced to witness. Our home itself seemed to change. Objects would move inexplicably. Religious pictures would be found turned backwards or on the floor. The temperature would drop randomly in different rooms, and strange sounds echoed through the halls at night. The most disturbing incident happened when I found all of Sarah's photos had been turned face down. And when I righted them, every one showed her face scratched out by what looked like claw marks. My work suffered as sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My boss was understanding at first, but after I fell asleep during a client meeting, his patience began to wear thin. The dark circles under my eyes and my increasingly disheveled appearance didn't help matters. I started taking work home, trying to catch up during the brief periods when Lily actually slept. The community's reaction was divided. Half of our church congregation rallied around us, organizing prayer circles and bringing meals. The other half kept their distance, as if Lily's condition might be contagious. Some suggested she needed psychological help rather than spiritual intervention. Others whispered that her affliction was divine punishment for my wavering faith after Sarah's death. Even simple trips to the grocery store became ordeals. Lily would freeze in certain aisles, claiming she could see him watching us from behind the shelves. Once she had a complete breakdown in the checkout line, screaming that every barcode was his mark, and that everyone in the store was already wearing it on their souls. The final straw came when Lily's Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Davis, asked her not to return to class. She told the other children that their parents were already chosen for the throne, Mrs. Davis explained uncomfortably. We had 5 sets of parents complaining. "I'm sorry, John, but until she's better, perhaps private Bible study would be more appropriate." Through it all, I found myself torn between terror and heartbreak. Watching my beautiful, innocent daughter transform into someone I barely recognized was unbearable. Yet every time I considered seeking psychiatric help, something would happen, another inexplicable occurrence, another display of knowledge she couldn't possibly possess that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality and faith. Pastor James's words kept echoing in my mind, "This is beyond simple grief," but if it wasn't grief, what was it? And more importantly, how could I protect my daughter from something I couldn't even understand? Pastor James asked to meet me alone one evening at the church after his wife had taken Lily for ice cream. The autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows as I found him sitting in the front pew, his face grave in the dimming light. "There's something I need to tell you, John," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "Something I've never told anyone in the congregation." He pulled out an old, worn photograph from his Bible and handed it to me. It showed a young girl, perhaps Lily's age, with the same innocent smile. This was my daughter, Emma. She would have been 28 this year. My hand trembled as I held the photo. In all the years we'd known Pastor James, he'd never mentioned having a child. "What happened to her?" I asked, though something in my gut told me I already knew. "It started just like this," he said, his voice cracking. "After her mother died. The nightmares, the strange languages, the knowledge of things she couldn't possibly know." He paused, wiping his eyes. "She told us about the throne too, John. The throne made of suffering souls." The photo slipped from my numb fingers. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I demanded, anger and fear warring in my chest, when Lily first started showing signs. "Because I didn't want to believe it was happening again," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "Because for 18 years, I've been trying to convince myself that what happened to Emma was something else. Anything else. A mental breakdown. A medical condition. Not what it really was." He told me how it progressed with Emma. The same pattern: first the dreams, then the physical marks, the speaking in tongues, the prophecies. But with Emma, we waited too long. We tried conventional help first, doctors, psychiatrists, medication. By the time we realized what we were really dealing with. His voice trailed off and he pulled out another photo. This one showed Emma in a hospital bed, her once healthy face gaunt and gray, her eyes sunken and dark. She lasted 6 months from the first nightmare. In the end, she told us she could feel herself becoming part of his throne, that her soul was being woven into it, thread by thread. My blood ran cold as I remembered Lily's words about the throne. How did it end? I whispered, not sure I wanted to know the answer. Pastor James's hands shook as he took back the photos. The night she died, she spoke a prophecy. She said he would keep building his throne, soul by soul, starting with the most innocent, the children who still had pure faith, that each soul he claimed would make him stronger, until he had enough power to manifest fully in our world. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears and fierce determination. But Emma also said something else, something I've held on to all these years. She said that a child protected by a mother's love from beyond could break his power, that a father's renewed faith could shatter his throne. Sarah, I breathed, remembering Lily's claims of seeing her mother in white. Yes, Pastor James nodded. I believe Sarah's spirit is trying to protect Lily, but it's not enough on its own. You have to find your faith again, John, not just the motions, not just the words, but real, deep, unshakable faith. Emma didn't have that chance. Both her parents had lost their way after her mother died. But Lily still has you. Standing up, he led me to the altar. The next few weeks will be crucial. He's stronger now than he was in Emma's time. All these years collecting souls, building his power. But Lily is special. She has something Emma didn't. She has a mother who loved God so deeply that not even death could stop her from protecting her child, and she has you. As we knelt to pray, Pastor James gripped my hand. I couldn't save my Emma, he said softly. But God has given me a chance to help save Lily. We'll fight this together, John, with everything we have. Looking at the cross above the altar, I felt something stir in my heart, the first flicker of real faith I'd felt since Sarah's death. Tell me everything you know, I said. Tell me how to save my daughter. The news spread through Cedar Grove like wildfire. Within days of Pastor James's revelation, other parents began coming forward. The Martinez family's 8-year-old son had started speaking in ancient Greek during his sleep. The Thompson twins both drew identical pictures of a throne made of screaming faces. Little Amy Parker from Lily's class had developed unexplainable bruises in the shape of handprints. The community fractured almost immediately. During an emergency town hall meeting at the church, the division became painfully clear. Dr. Richards, our town's most respected pediatrician, stood up and declared it a clear case of mass hysteria. Children are susceptible to suggestion, he argued. One child has nightmares, talks about them at school, and suddenly everyone's experiencing the same thing. We need psychological intervention, not exorcisms. But Mrs. Thompson, clutching her twins' drawings, tearfully disagreed. My girls have never heard about Lily's dreams, she insisted. They're in different classes. They've been drawing these pictures for weeks, but were too scared to show me. How do you explain them drawing the exact same throne, down to the smallest detail? The debate grew heated. The school board called an emergency meeting to discuss whether affected children should be separated from others. Some parents demanded the school bring in child psychologists. Others called for daily prayer sessions. Principal Matthews found himself caught in the middle, trying to maintain order while watching his student body divide into the haunted and the normal kids. Local media caught wind of the story. A reporter from the Cedar Grove Gazette wrote a front-page article titled "Mass Hysteria or Spiritual Warfare." The piece quoted various experts, from psychiatric professionals to religious scholars, each offering their own interpretation of events. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, which I declined. The last thing Lily needed was more attention. The affected children began to bond, drawn together by their shared experiences. During lunch breaks, they would gather in a corner of the playground, singing hymns and praying together. Other students either avoided them completely or watched from a distance with a mixture of fear and fascination. Teachers reported that these children, previously unconnected, now seemed to communicate without speaking, often turning to look at something invisible at the exact same time. Pastor James's church became a sanctuary for the affected families. He organized special prayer meetings, sharing what he'd learned from Emma's case without revealing its personal nature. But even within the congregation, tensions rose. Some longtime members left, uncomfortable with what they saw as a drift toward superstitious nonsense. Others became almost fanatical in their support, claiming this was the beginning of the end times prophesied in Revelation. The most disturbing development came when Emily Stewart, one of the affected children, stopped speaking entirely. Her parents found her one morning sitting in her closet, writing the same phrase over and over on the walls, "The throne needs more." When they tried to take her to the hospital, she became violent, displaying strength no 7-year-old should possess. Local law enforcement became involved after someone threw a brick through the Stewart's window with a note attached, "Stop spreading your demons to our children." Sheriff Anderson increased patrols in neighborhoods with affected families, but the damage was done. Our tight-knit community had become a powder keg of fear, suspicion, and rising hostility. Through it all, Lily seemed to withdraw further into herself. She spoke only to other affected children, and even then in whispers. At home, she would stand for hours staring at her mother's photos, murmuring, "Help us, Mommy, he's getting stronger." The other children began looking to her as a leader of sorts, though she never sought the role. They said she could see things more clearly than they could, that she understood what was coming. One evening, as I watched Lily sitting in a circle with 5 other affected children in our backyard, I saw something that made my blood run cold. As the sun set behind them, their shadows didn't fall where they should have. Instead, they all pointed inward, forming the shape of what looked like a throne. Pastor James gripped my arm. "It's happening faster than with Emma," he whispered. "He's learned. He's using their connections to each other to build his power. We're running out of time." Looking at those twisted shadows, I realized we were past the point of debating whether this was real. The only question now was, could we stop it before it was too late? The escalation began on a Sunday morning, exactly 1 month after Lily's first nightmare. During the children's choir performance, all 7 affected children suddenly stopped singing the hymn they'd rehearsed and began chanting in unison an ancient language that Professor Barrett, a visiting biblical scholar, would later identify as pre-Babylonian Aramaic. The sanctuary grew unnaturally cold, and every candle on the altar extinguished simultaneously. Lily, standing at the center of the choir, lifted her hands, and the other children followed suit. Their voices grew louder, more discordant, until the stained glass windows began to vibrate. Then, in perfect English, they spoke as one: "The throne grows. The faithful fall. The time draws near." Several elderly parishioners fainted, and Mrs. Thompson's twins began bleeding from their noses. That night, Lily's condition deteriorated dramatically. She refused to eat, claiming that any food would contaminate the vessel. Her skin became pale and translucent, like alabaster held up to light. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, which had lost their beautiful blue color and taken on a strange, opalescent quality. She was wasting away before my eyes, yet the doctors could find nothing physically wrong with her. The most terrifying changes happened at night. I'd installed cameras in her room, hoping to document the inexplicable events for the team of researchers who'd taken interest in the case. The footage showed Lily levitating several inches above her bed during sleep, her hair floating as if underwater. Objects would orbit around her like satellites: her Bible, her mother's cross, her stuffed animals. But most disturbing were the shadows that moved independently of any light source, forming shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. During one particularly harrowing night, Lily spoke to Sarah's spirit for the first time in my presence. I found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, having what appeared to be a two-sided conversation. "Yes, Mommy, I can see you," she said to the empty air. "I know you're trying to help, but he's so strong now. The others, they're already part of it. Their souls are screaming." Then her voice changed, becoming older, more like Sarah's baby. "You have to fight. Remember what I taught you about God's love. Remember your Father's strength. The throne can be broken, but only by perfect faith." When I tried to approach, an invisible force held me back, and the temperature dropped so low that frost formed on the windows. Pastor James began spending nights at our house documenting everything in a journal. He noticed patterns we'd missed. The events intensified during the waning moon, and the children's prophecies often corresponded to obscure biblical texts about the end times. But more importantly, he noticed that Lily seemed stronger when we prayed together, when I showed true faith rather than just going through the motions. The physical manifestations became impossible to ignore. Lily's room would sometimes fill with a thick, dark mist that formed shapes, faces, hands, and most often the outline of a massive throne. Her skin would develop stigmata-like marks that would fade by morning. Objects associated with her mother, photos, jewelry, clothing would move on their own, often placing themselves in protective circles around her bed. One morning I found Lily in Sarah's old closet, surrounded by her mother's clothes. She had arranged them in a complex pattern on the floor, each item placed with precise purpose. "The patterns keep him away," she explained, her voice distant. "Mommy showed me how. She says he can't touch anything that's been blessed by true love." The other affected children reported similar experiences. They would wake up with identical marks on their bodies, speak the same phrases in ancient languages, and draw the same disturbing images. They claimed to see Sarah too, describing her exactly as she'd looked in life, saying she moved between them like a guardian angel, fighting a battle they could only partially perceive. But the most chilling development was their deteriorating physical condition. Like Lily, they all began to waste away as if something was feeding on their very life force. Medical tests showed their organs were functioning normally, yet they grew weaker by the day. "He's preparing us," Lily explained matter-of-factly. "The throne needs to be built from pure vessels. We have to be empty so he can fill us with his darkness." Pastor James recognized the pattern from Emma's case. "It's accelerated this time," he said grimly. "With Emma, the physical decline took months. He's stronger now, more efficient. He's learned from every soul he's taken." The pastor's hands shook as he showed me his journal filled with sketches and notes. "Look at this, the throne they keep drawing. It's bigger than the one Emma described. More souls, more power." The final straw came when Lily began speaking in Sarah's voice during her episodes. Not just the tone or manner, but Sarah's exact voice, saying things only she could have known. She revealed details about our private moments, secrets we'd never shared with anyone. But more terrifyingly, she spoke of what she could see from the other side, a massive battle being waged in a realm just beyond our perception, with forces of light and darkness clashing over the souls of the children. During one such episode, Sarah turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "John, my love, you have to hurry. Your faith is the key. He chose these children because they're pure, but he chose Lily specifically because of you. Your doubt, your anger at God after my death had created a crack in her spiritual armor. But your love for her, your return to true faith, it can seal that crack. You can save them all." As she spoke these words, every light in the house exploded simultaneously, and a deep, rumbling voice spoke from the shadows. "The vessel speaks truth, but it's too late. The throne nears completion. Love cannot save them now. Faith cannot stand against the darkness that comes." Pastor James grabbed my arm, his face pale. "We need to move faster," he said urgently. "Call the other families. It's time to tell them everything about Emma, about Sarah's spirit, about the true nature of what we're fighting. No more debates about psychology versus spirituality. This is a battle for souls, and we're running out of time." That night, as I watched Lily finally fall into a fitful sleep, I made a promise to both her and Sarah. I would find my faith again, stronger than ever. I would fight this evil with everything I had. I would save our daughter no matter the cost. What I didn't know then was just how high that cost would be and how much we would all have to sacrifice before this battle was over. Cedar Grove became a town divided against itself. The local media coverage had attracted attention from larger networks, and soon our quiet community was overrun with news vans, paranormal investigators, and religious zealots. Each group brought their own interpretation of events, further fracturing an already strained community. The school board held an emergency session that lasted well into the night. Principal Matthews presented a difficult situation. Attendance had dropped by 30% as parents kept their normal children home, fearing contamination. The affected children, now numbering 12, were struggling to maintain consciousness during classes, speaking in tongues during lessons, and causing unexplainable phenomena that disrupted learning. Dr. Richards led the faction advocating for separate classes. "This isn't about discrimination," he argued, his voice strained with forced rationality. "It's about providing appropriate care and maintaining a functional learning environment." His proposal was met with both vehement support and accusations of prejudice. The debate spilled out onto social media, where local Facebook groups became battlegrounds. Videos of the children's episodes went viral, leading to endless discussions about digital manipulation versus genuine supernatural events. Some parents started a Save Our Children campaign, complete with prayer vigils and protests outside the school. Others formed a science and sanity group, bringing in psychiatrists and behavioral experts to offer alternative explanations. The church congregation split into 3 distinct groups. The largest faction, led by Pastor James, fully embraced the spiritual warfare narrative and devoted themselves to prayer and fasting for the affected families. A smaller group left to form their own rational faith congregation, claiming our church had descended into medieval superstition. The third group tried to maintain middle ground, offering support while avoiding direct involvement. Local businesses found themselves caught in the crossfire. The owner of Cedar Grove Diner faced boycotts from both sides after putting up a Pray for Our Children sign. The bookstore was criticized for creating a display featuring both religious texts about possession and psychiatric works on mass hysteria. Even the annual Halloween carnival became controversial, with some calling for its cancellation out of respect for the ongoing crisis, while others insisted on maintaining normalcy. The medical community wasn't spared the division. Dr. Richards and his colleagues at Cedar Grove General Hospital published a paper suggesting a case of mass psychogenic illness, citing historical precedents. In response, Dr. Sarah Collins, a respected neurologist, broke ranks to report inexplicable readings from the affected children's brain scans. These patterns, she stated in a controversial press conference, don't correspond to any known neurological condition. We're seeing simultaneous activation in regions that shouldn't be able to fire together. The police department struggled to maintain order. Sheriff Anderson reported a spike in vandalism targeting both affected families and vocal skeptics. Anonymous threats were made against Pastor James and Dr. Richards alike. The tension reached a boiling point when someone broke into the church and destroyed the altar, leaving behind a message, "Stop poisoning our children with lies." The national media descended like vultures, each outlet spinning the story to fit their narrative. Conservative networks portrayed it as a spiritual awakening, while liberal outlets suggested mass hysteria fueled by religious fervor. Amateur documentarians roamed the streets, trying to interview anyone connected to the affected children. Our lawns were cluttered with both prayer groups and protest signs. The affected families found themselves increasingly isolated. Grocery stores would empty when they entered. Other parents would cross the street to avoid passing them. Even longtime friends began to keep their distance, torn between sympathy and fear. We formed our own support network out of necessity, taking turns with childcare, sharing resources, and protecting each other from the growing hostility. The town council meetings became a circus. Every session devolved into heated arguments between various factions. The mayor, attempting to maintain order, proposed a task force comprising religious leaders, medical professionals, and community representatives. But selecting members proved impossible, as each group questioned the other's qualifications and motives. Through it all, the children's condition continued to deteriorate. They moved through town like shadows of themselves, speaking in riddles and ancient tongues, their eyes focused on things only they could see. People noticed that electronics malfunctioned in their presence. Lights flickered when they passed, and temperatures dropped in rooms they entered. The academic community took notice. Researchers from various fields descended on Cedar Grove, each seeking to document and study the phenomena from their perspective. Parapsychologists set up monitoring equipment in homes. Linguistic experts recorded and analyzed the unknown languages. Religious scholars pored over ancient texts, finding disturbing parallels to historical accounts of mass possessions. The final straw came during a town hall meeting meant to address the crisis. As various speakers argued their positions, all 12 affected children suddenly entered the hall, moving in perfect unison. They formed a circle in the center of the room and began to chant. The lights exploded, plunging the room into darkness. When emergency lights clicked on, they revealed a chilling sight: the children suspended several feet above the ground, their shadows forming the now familiar shape of a throne on the floor below them. In the chaos that followed, Pastor James's voice cut through the screams. "Now, do you believe? Will you help us fight this, or will you continue to debate while evil claims your children's souls?" The room fell silent, and in that moment, Cedar Grove faced a choice: continue their divisions or unite against something far darker than any of them had imagined. That night, as I watched yet another news van pass my house, I remembered Sarah's words about community and faith. She had always said that the greatest weapon against darkness was unity in the light. Looking at our fractured town, I wondered if we could find that unity before it was too late. The battle for our children's souls might depend on it. The sixth night arrived with an unnatural darkness that seemed to devour the streetlights. All 12 affected children had been brought to the church under Pastor James's guidance, their parents keeping vigil as they slept fitfully in the sanctuary. The air was thick with incense and prayers, and every candle in the church blazed despite the absence of drafts. Lily lay in the center, her small frame even more diminished after weeks of supernatural torment. The other children arranged themselves around her in a pattern that formed a perfect star, though no one had directed them to do so. As midnight approached, the temperature in the sanctuary plummeted, and frost began forming on the stained glass windows. The first sign that this night would be different came when all the children sat up simultaneously, their eyes still closed. Their voices joined in an ancient chant that made the very foundations of the church tremble. Pastor James, clutching his Bible, began to translate. "The throne is ready. The vessels are prepared. The time of merging is upon us." Lily's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer her eyes. Instead of their usual blue, they blazed with an otherworldly darkness that seemed to pull in all light. When she spoke, it was with 3 voices layered together, her own childish soprano, a deep, guttural growl, and heartbreakingly Sarah's gentle tone. "The cycle completes," the voices said. "What began with Emma concludes with these chosen ones. Their pure faith makes them perfect vessels for my darkness. Their innocent souls will be the final pieces of my throne." The other children began to levitate slightly, their bodies rigid and trembling. Pastor James stepped forward, holding his cross before him. "In the name of Christ, I command you," but before he could finish, an invisible force threw him against the wall. The entity speaking through Lily laughed, a sound that caused several stained glass windows to shatter. "Your faith is nothing," it mocked. "I have consumed hundreds of innocent souls. Each one has made me stronger. Each child's pure belief twisted to my purpose. And now, with these final 12, my throne will be complete. I will have enough power to manifest fully in your world." The other parents tried to reach their children but were held back by an invisible barrier. I alone could move forward, drawn toward Lily by a force I couldn't understand. As I approached, I saw Sarah's spirit manifesting beside her, more clearly than ever before. She was locked in what appeared to be a spiritual battle, trying to shield our daughter from the darkness that was attempting to consume her. John, Sarah's voice, cut through the chaos, using Lily's lips but somehow separate from the other voices. "Listen carefully. He chose Lily because of your lost faith. He fed on your doubt, your anger at God. But your love for her, your willingness to believe again, it's the key. Your renewal of faith can break his power." The dark voice roared in rage, and Lily's body began to contort unnaturally. The other children rose higher into the air, their bodies forming a twisted human chandelier above the altar. Their shadows darkened and merged, forming the now familiar shape of the throne, but this time it seemed more solid, more real. "Watch," the dark voice commanded. "Watch as I complete what I began with Emma. Watch as I take their souls one by one, weaving them into my throne of power. Starting with your precious Lily." Dark tendrils of what looked like living shadow began to emerge from the throne's shadow, reaching for the children. Where they touched skin, they left burning marks that glowed with an unholy light. The children began to scream in unison, a sound of such pure anguish that every light bulb in the church exploded. But then something extraordinary happened. Sarah's spirit became fully visible to everyone in the room, her form glowing with a pure white light. She positioned herself between the darkness and Lily, her arms spread wide. "You cannot have her," she declared. "A mother's love doesn't end with death, and my love for her is blessed by God himself." The entity laughed again. "You think your love is stronger than my power? I have been consuming souls since before your God walked the earth. Your love is nothing against the darkness I command." The shadows grew thicker, more substantial, wrapping around Sarah's spirit like dark serpents. I watched in horror as both my wife's spirit and my daughter's body became battlegrounds between light and darkness. The other children began speaking in tongues, their voices building to a crescendo that shook the church's very foundations. Pastor James staggered to his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, and began to pray with an intensity I'd never witnessed before. The entity's next words chilled my soul. "Your wife's spirit has been a thorn in my side, protecting these vessels, delaying my triumph. So let me show you what happens to those who defy me." With a gesture, the shadows began to tear at Sarah's spiritual form. She cried out in pain, and in that moment I felt something inside me break and reform my doubt, giving way to a pure, burning faith. Looking at my wife's spirit fighting for our daughter's soul, I finally understood. This wasn't about religion or supernatural phenomena. This was about love, a love so pure and strong it transcended death itself. A love blessed by God and powerful enough to stand against ancient evil. As this realization hit me, Sarah's spirit turned to meet my eyes. In that moment, we were connected just as strongly as we had been in life, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The battle for Lily's soul and the souls of all the children had reached its climax. But this time we would face it together with a faith stronger than death and a love powerful enough to shake the foundations of hell itself. Writing Part 6 Billion Battle for Souls, 1,250 words. As the confrontation in the church reached its climax, the community's response became something extraordinary. The news of what was happening inside the sanctuary spread rapidly through Cedar Grove, drawing people from all walks of life. Those who had been divided by skepticism and belief now found themselves united by a common purpose: saving the children. A massive prayer vigil formed outside the church, with hundreds of people holding candles and reciting prayers in various languages and faiths. The skeptics who had once dismissed the supernatural events stood shoulder to shoulder with the devout, their previous arguments forgotten in the face of undeniable evil. Inside, Pastor James orchestrated a spiritual battle unlike anything recorded in modern history. He positioned the parents in a circle around their children, each holding items of personal spiritual significance: Bibles, crosses, photos of loved ones who had passed. The medical team, led by Dr. Richards, maintained their vigil as well, monitoring the children's failing vital signs while witnessing things that defied all scientific explanation. The throne requires 12 pure souls, the entity spoke through Lily. 12 pillars of innocence to complete what began centuries ago. Through them I will manifest fully in your world. The darkness swirled around the children, trying to separate them from their parents' protective circle. Sarah's spirit, though weakened, continued her desperate defense. She moved between the children, her light creating brief barriers against the encroaching darkness. Other spirits began to manifest as well. Pastor James saw Emma, his long-lost daughter, her spirit joining Sarah's in protecting the children. More spirits appeared: parents, siblings, loved ones who had passed, all joining the battle against darkness. The entity raged against this spiritual reinforcement. Your dead cannot save them. Their souls are already woven into my throne. Every spirit that manifests here only adds to my power. The darkness began to take solid form, creating a horrific throne that was partly visible in our world. The screams of countless trapped souls echoed from within it. Biblical prophecies seemed to come alive before our eyes. Passages about spiritual warfare that had once seemed metaphorical now played out in terrible reality. Pastor James called out verses that made the darkness recoil: for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. The children's bodies began to levitate, suspended in the air by supernatural force. Their souls were being slowly pulled from their bodies, visible as glowing essences that the darkness tried to weave into its throne. Parents screamed and tried to reach their children, but an invisible barrier held them back. Medical equipment exploded in showers of sparks as the spiritual battle interfered with electronic devices. Dr. Richards and his team worked frantically to maintain some monitoring of the children's vital signs, but it was becoming clear that this battle would not be won by science. The congregation's prayers grew more intense, more focused. Those who had been lifetime skeptics found themselves crying out to God with desperate sincerity. Former enemies grabbed each other's hands, forming chains of prayer that seemed to generate actual light in the darkness-filled sanctuary. Professor Barrett, the biblical scholar who had been documenting the events, suddenly recognized patterns in the entity's manifestation. The throne, he shouted above the chaos. It's described in ancient texts a seat of power built from corrupted innocence. But the texts also speak of its weakness. Before he could explain further, the entity lashed out. Dark tendrils wrapped around the professor's throat, silencing him. Pastor James rushed to retrieve the ancient texts, understanding that they might hold the key to salvation. But the entity's power was growing stronger with each passing moment. Through it all, Sarah's spirit continued her desperate defense of our daughter and the other children. Her light, though fading, refused to give up. "John," she called to me, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "Remember what we taught Lily about faith. Perfect love casts out fear. Perfect faith can move mountains. The throne can be broken, but only by a sacrifice freely given." The entity laughed at her words. "Sacrifice? I have consumed countless sacrifices. Every parent who lost faith when their child died. Every soul that turned from God in grief and anger. Your pathetic sacrifices only make me stronger." But something in Sarah's words resonated with Pastor James. He looked at me with sudden understanding, remembering how Emma had died. "John," he said urgently, "Sarah's right. The entity feeds on sacrifices taken by force, but it has never faced a sacrifice freely given from perfect faith." The battle reached a fever pitch. The children's souls were now halfway absorbed into the throne. Their bodies convulsed in mid-air, vital signs dropping precipitously. The barrier between our world and the spiritual realm had grown so thin that everyone could see both realities overlapping: the physical church and the supernatural battle being waged within it. Parents dropped to their knees, offering everything they had to save their children. The congregation's prayers became one unified voice, rising above the entity's roars of rage. Sarah's spirit, joined by other souls of the faithful departed, fought with the last of their strength against the darkness. And in that moment of crisis, as my daughter's soul hung in the balance between salvation and damnation, I finally understood what both Sarah and Pastor James had been trying to tell me. The entity's power came from faith stolen through pain and fear, but it had never encountered faith freely given through love. Looking at Sarah's spirit fighting for our child's soul, at Pastor James who had lost his own daughter to this evil, at the congregation united in desperate prayer, I knew what had to be done. The price would be higher than anything I had imagined, but as Sarah had said, perfect love casts out fear. The time had come for a sacrifice that could break the throne's power, not one taken by force, but one freely given from perfect faith. The question was, did I have the strength to pay that price? And would it be enough to save not just Lily, but all the children whose souls hung in the balance? The moment of crisis arrived with devastating swiftness. As the battle between Sarah's spirit and the darkness reached its peak, Lily's small body began to fail. Her lips turned blue, her skin became translucent, and the monitors the medical team had insisted on installing began screaming in alarm. Dr. Richards, who had finally accepted the supernatural nature of our crisis, shouted that she was coding. "Her soul is being torn," Sarah's voice cried out, though her spiritual form was barely visible now through the writhing darkness. "He's trying to rip her from her body to complete the throne. If he succeeds, all the children will follow." The other affected children began convulsing in unison, their vital signs plummeting in sync with Lily's. I rushed to my daughter's side, fighting against the oppressive darkness that tried to hold me back. Her body was ice cold, and for the first time I could actually see the battle for her soul with my physical eyes. It appeared as a tug of war of light and shadow centered in her chest, with Sarah's diminishing light desperately holding on to a glowing essence that I somehow knew was Lily's soul. "You can't have her," I screamed, gathering Lily's limp body in my arms. "Dear God, please, not my little girl too." Pastor James began quoting scripture, his voice rising above the chaos. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." The entity laughed, a sound that brought everyone in the room to their knees. "Watch as I take them all," it gloated. "Your daughter's pure soul will be the cornerstone of my throne. The others will follow like dominoes, and your wife's spirit, I will corrupt her light and use it to power my final manifestation." Lily's heart stopped. The monitors flatlined with a continuous shriek. Dr. Richards rushed forward with a crash cart, but an invisible force held him back. "We're losing her," he shouted. "We need to start resuscitation now." but we couldn't reach her. The darkness had created an impenetrable barrier around her body. Through it, I could see Lily's soul being pulled further and further from her body, even as Sarah's weakening light tried desperately to hold on. The other children began to fade as well, their bodies becoming transparent as their souls were drawn toward the growing throne of darkness. John Sarah's voice was barely a whisper now. Remember what I taught Lily about faith. Remember what we believed together. Only perfect faith can break his power. Only perfect love can defeat perfect darkness. Lily's spirit opened her eyes, not her physical ones, but her soul's eyes. They found mine filled with terror and confusion. "Daddy," she called, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. "Daddy, help me, it hurts. The throne. I can feel it pulling me in. I can hear the other souls screaming." The medical team worked frantically, trying to reach her physical body through the barrier of darkness. The other parents were held back by similar barriers, watching in horror as their children began to follow Lily into death. Pastor James's prayers grew more desperate, his voice cracking with emotion as he recalled losing his own daughter to this same evil. Through my tears, I saw Sarah's spirit growing dimmer, her light barely visible now against the overwhelming darkness. Our daughter's soul was slipping away, being drawn into that hideous throne along with the others. The entity's laughter grew louder, more triumphant as death crept closer. In that moment of absolute despair, watching both my wife and daughter fading before my eyes, something broke inside me. All my doubts, all my anger at God, all my questions about faith and evil and loss, they crystallized into a single, perfect moment of clarity. I understood suddenly what Sarah had been trying to tell me all along, what Pastor James had learned too late with Emma, what the entity hadn't counted on. But understanding came at a terrible price, and as I watched my daughter's soul being torn from her body, I realized that saving her would require a sacrifice greater than anything I had imagined. The question was, did I have the strength and faith to make it? In that moment of ultimate crisis, my faith faced its greatest test. Seeing Lily's physical body lifeless on the altar while her soul was being pulled into that horrific throne, I felt myself teetering on the edge of complete despair. Sarah's spirit was nearly extinguished, her light barely visible against the encroaching darkness. The other parents' screams echoed through the sanctuary as their children began to follow Lily into death's embrace. Pastor James fought his way to my side, his face streaked with tears. Johnny gasped, clutching my arm. I failed Emma because I didn't understand. "But you can still save them. Perfect faith requires perfect sacrifice. Are you willing to pay that price?" The entity's mocking laughter filled the church. "Yes, John Mitchell, are you willing? Your wife gave her life. Your daughter is giving her soul. What more could you possibly offer the darkness swirled around us, growing denser, more substantial with each passing second?" The community that had been so divided now united in desperate prayer. Even Dr. Richards, who had fought so hard against the supernatural explanation, was on his knees, his scientific certainty shattered by what he was witnessing. The protesters who had picketed our homes now stood shoulder to shoulder with those they had condemned, their voices raised together in supplication. "Remember what you told me after Sarah died," Pastor James's voice cut through the chaos. "You said you'd give anything to see her again, to protect Lily from pain. God is testing that promise now." His words struck me like physical blows, each one forcing me to confront my own failures of faith. I looked at my daughter's physical form, so small and pale on the altar. Her soul was now barely tethered to her body by the thinnest thread of Sarah's fading light. The other children were following her into that terrible in-between space, their souls being woven one by one into the throne of darkness. Even the skeptics in the room could see it now. The physical world had torn open enough to reveal the spiritual battle being waged. The medical team worked frantically, trying to restart Lily's heart, but their equipment sparked and failed in the presence of such overwhelming darkness. Dr. Richards shouted orders that no one could follow, his medical expertise useless against this supernatural assault. Through my tears, I saw Sarah's spirit turn to me one last time. Her light was almost gone, but her eyes still held the same love I'd seen every day of our marriage. "John," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos, "remember what real faith looks like. Remember what we taught Lily. Perfect love casts out fear." The entity's voice boomed through the sanctuary, "Your faith is worthless. Look at what your God allows: innocent children dying, a mother's spirit being corrupted, a father powerless to save his family. Where is your perfect love now?" I fell to my knees beside Lily's body, overwhelmed by the weight of my failure. I had let my grief over Sarah's death poison my faith. I had let my anger at God create a crack in our family's spiritual armor. I had given this ancient evil the very opening it needed to attack, not just my daughter, but all these innocent children. The congregation surrounded us, their prayers growing stronger, more unified. People who had been enemies days before now held hands, crying out to God together. Pastor James led them in hymns, the same hymns Sarah used to sing in the choir, the ones Lily had learned at her mother's knee. But was it enough? Could any amount of faith repair what my doubts had broken? Could any prayer be strong enough to snatch these innocent souls from a throne built from centuries of stolen faith? As I watched my daughter and wife fading before my eyes, I faced the ultimate question: was I willing to pay the price that perfect faith demanded? The answer came to me in a moment of perfect clarity, accompanied by a memory of Sarah's voice reading from Corinthians, and now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. I knew then what I had to do, though the cost would be higher than I had ever imagined. In that moment of clarity, the truth about the entity's plan revealed itself with devastating precision. Through Sarah's fading spirit and Lily's dying form, I finally understood what Pastor James had been trying to tell me, what Emma's death had taught him too late, and what the Antichrist had been orchestrating for centuries. It was never about the children, I said aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word. The throne isn't the end goal, it's the parents' faith you're really after. The entity's laughter faltered for the first time, and Sarah's light flickered brighter for just a moment. Pastor James stepped forward, his eyes wide with recognition. Of course, he breathed. Emma's death didn't just take her soul, it destroyed my faith. Each child added to the throne represents dozens of broken believers. Parents, family, entire communities losing their faith in God's love. The entity's darkness churned angrily. "You understand nothing," it snarled, but there was an edge of uncertainty in its voice. Through the darkness I could see the throne more clearly now, not just made of children's souls, but surrounded by a deeper darkness comprised of countless adult souls who had turned away from God in their grief and anger. "That's why you chose Lily," I continued, the truth pouring out of me. "Not just because of her pure faith, but because my faith was already damaged by Sarah's death. You've been building this throne for centuries, using innocent children to create a cascade of lost faith. Each child's death destroys the faith of everyone who loves them." Sarah's spirit grew marginally stronger as the truth emerged. "John," she called, her voice clearer than before, "it feeds on doubt. Each parent's loss of faith makes it stronger. That's why my spirit could fight it, because I died still believing, still loving, still faithful." The other parents in the room began to understand, their faces showing dawning recognition. The entity had been playing a longer game than any of us had realized. Each child taken didn't just add one soul to its throne, it created a ripple effect of broken faith that spread through families, churches, and entire communities. "Emma's death," Pastor James said, his voice shaking, "it didn't just break my faith. It caused a dozen families to leave the church. Some stopped believing entirely. Others turned to darker beliefs out of desperation." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "And it's happening again. Look at how our community has fractured, how many have already turned away from God in confusion and fear." The entity's form began to shift, becoming more defined as our understanding grew. We could see now that the throne wasn't just a seat of power, it was a machine designed to convert pure faith into pure darkness. Each child's soul was a catalyst, their innocent belief corrupted to destroy the faith of those around them. "But you made a mistake this time," I said, standing straighter. "You chose Lily because my faith was broken, but you didn't count on Sarah's love being stronger than death. You didn't realize that understanding your plan would give us the weapon we need to fight you." The darkness lashed out violently, sending several people sprawling. "Your understanding changes nothing," it roared. "The throne is nearly complete. These souls are mine. Your daughter's pure faith will be the final key, and your broken belief will seal her fate." But something had changed in the room. The prayers of the congregation took on a new strength as people realized what we were really fighting. This wasn't just a battle for our children's souls, it was a battle for faith itself. The entity had been using our love against us, turning our deepest beliefs into weapons of darkness. Sarah's spirit, though still desperately holding on to Lily's soul, managed to speak one last time. John, now you know why your faith is the key. Perfect faith isn't about never doubting, it's about choosing to believe despite the darkness. Show her what real faith looks like. Looking at my daughter's soul, still suspended between life and death, I understood what I had to do. The price of perfect faith was higher than I had imagined, but I finally knew how to pay it. The entity had revealed its true plan, but in doing so, it had also revealed its greatest weakness. The revelation sparked a transformation in the sanctuary. As understanding spread through the congregation, their prayers changed from desperate pleas to powerful declarations of faith. The entity's darkness churned violently, but for the first time it seemed defensive rather than triumphant. I moved to Lily's body, still lifeless, on the altar, and placed my hand over her heart. You chose her because my faith was broken, I announced, my voice steady and strong. But you forgot something crucial about faith: it can be rebuilt stronger than before. Sarah taught me that. Lily taught me that. Even your attacks have taught me that. Pastor James stepped forward, holding his Bible high. That's what Emma was trying to tell me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Her last words, they weren't about defeat. They were a prophecy about this moment. Perfect faith can break the throne, she said. A father's love, blessed by God, stronger for having been broken. The entity's response was immediate and violent. The darkness congealed into horrible shapes, trying to force us back from Lily. But Sarah's spirit, though barely visible, still held firm to our daughter's soul. John, she called, recite it with me. The prayer we taught Lily when she was afraid. Together, our voices joined in the simple prayer we'd said with Lily every night until Sarah's death. Perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. As we spoke, Sarah's light grew stronger, more focused. The other parents, understanding now, began to pray for their children, not from fear, but from love. Each declaration of faith seemed to strengthen Sarah's light and weaken the darkness around us. The entity screamed in rage, but its hold on the children's souls began to waver. Your throne is built on stolen faith, I declared, but you can't steal what's freely given. Every parent here chooses to believe, not despite their fear, but because of their love. The congregation's voices rose in agreement, and the darkness around us began to retreat. Biblical verses that Sarah had loved poured from my memory. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Each verse seemed to add strength to Sarah's spirit, allowing her to pull Lily's soul back from the throne. The entity made one final, desperate attempt to complete its throne. The darkness consolidated into a massive, horrifying form, and its voice shook the foundations of the church. You cannot stop what has been building for centuries. These souls are mine. But in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The faith of the congregation, unified and strengthened by understanding, began to manifest as physical light. But it started small, just a few sparkles of divine illumination, but grew rapidly into a brilliant radiance that pushed back against the darkness. Sarah's spirit, empowered by this display of true faith, began to glow brighter than ever. Now, John, she called, show Lily what perfect faith looks like. Show her that love is stronger than fear, that faith rebuilt is stronger than faith untested. The entity's throne began to tremble as, one by one, the children's souls began to respond to their parents' declarations of faith. The darkness that had bound them started to crack, letting divine light shine through. Pastor James, tears streaming down his face, added his voice, Emma, my precious daughter, your death was not in vain. Your warning has given us the weapon we need, perfect faith born from perfect love. The truth of what we were witnessing became clear to everyone in the sanctuary. This wasn't just a battle between good and evil, it was a demonstration of faith's true nature. Faith wasn't about never doubting, it was about choosing to believe even after doubt. It wasn't about avoiding darkness, it was about carrying light into the darkest places. As this understanding filled the room, the entity's power began to falter visibly. Its throne, built on stolen and corrupted faith, couldn't stand against freely given, consciously chosen belief. The darkness that had seemed so overwhelming began to thin, revealing the path to victory, though that victory would demand one final, terrible price. The final battle for our children's souls came down to a single moment of perfect faith. As the entity's throne began to crumble under the weight of our unified belief, I made the ultimate choice that Sarah's spirit had been preparing me for all along. "Take me instead," I declared, stepping forward into the darkness. My soul for all of theirs. My faith freely given, not stolen. The entity's darkness swirled around me, curious and hungry. Sarah's spirit flared in alarm, but I could feel her understanding. "John," no, Pastor James called out, but I raised my hand to stop him. "It's what Emma was trying to tell you," I said. "Perfect faith requires perfect sacrifice. A father's love freely given can break the throne." The entity's laughter turned uncertain as it sensed the power in my offer. "You would trade your soul for theirs," it mocked, but I could hear the edge of concern in its voice. "Your willing sacrifice for their unwilling ones." The darkness pressed closer, testing my resolve. "Yes," I answered simply, "but not just my soul, my complete faith. Not faith broken by grief, but faith made stronger through loss. Faith tested by fire and reformed into something unbreakable." As I spoke, Sarah's light grew brighter, and Lily's soul began to pulse with renewed strength. The entity hesitated, its darkness churning in confusion. This was something it had never encountered, not faith stolen through pain and loss, but faith freely offered through love. The very foundation of its power began to shake. I took another step forward, continuing, "You built your throne on stolen faith, corrupted by fear and doubt. But perfect love casts out fear. And my love for my daughter, my faith in God, my trust in the sacrifice of love, they're all freely given." Sarah's spirit moved to my side, her light merging with my declaration of faith. Together we stood before the darkness, a united front of earthly and heavenly love. The entity's throne trembled as the souls within it responded to our combined light. "Even if this destroys me," I declared, "I choose to believe. I choose to have faith. Not because I must, but because I want to. That's what you never understood about true faith. It has to be chosen, not taken." In that moment, something extraordinary happened. My willing sacrifice, combined with Sarah's eternal love and the congregation's unified faith, created a light so pure it pierced the very heart of darkness. The entity screamed as its throne began to unravel, the stolen souls within it responding to the call of freely given faith. One by one, the children's souls broke free from the weakening throne. Lily's soul was the first, pulled back by Sarah's love and my sacrifice. The others followed, drawn to the light of their parents' unconditional love and unshakable faith. The entity made one final, desperate attempt to maintain its power. The darkness consolidated around me, trying to claim the soul I had offered. But instead of finding broken faith to corrupt, it encountered something it couldn't comprehend: faith strengthened by loss, love deepened by grief, belief made perfect through sacrifice. "This isn't possible," it howled as its power began to dissolve. "Faith broken cannot be restored," but with each soul that broke free from its throne, my own faith grew stronger, proving its words false. Sarah's spirit blazed like a sun, her voice ringing with triumph. "Perfect love casts out fear, and perfect faith breaks every chain. Our daughter is free, and your power is broken." The darkness that had seemed so overwhelming began to dissolve, unable to maintain its hold in the face of freely given faith. The throne, built over centuries of stolen belief, collapsed in on itself, releasing every soul it had claimed. As the entity's power crumbled, Lily's physical body suddenly gasped for air, her heart beginning to beat again. The other children followed, returning to life one by one as their souls reunited with their bodies. The medical team rushed to attend them, their monitors now showing strong, steady heartbeats. But even as victory seemed assured, I felt myself being pulled into a space between light and darkness. The price of freely given faith would still need to be paid. The question was, would my sacrifice be enough to ensure the entity could never rebuild its throne of stolen souls? What happened next remains a testament to the power of faith and love. As I felt myself being drawn into darkness, ready to pay the price of my sacrifice, something unexpected occurred. Every soul that had been freed from the throne began to shine with its own light, each one adding its freely given faith to mine. Sarah's spirit, still radiant with heavenly light, moved to embrace me. "Perfect sacrifice doesn't mean destruction," she said softly. "Remember what we learned from the greatest sacrifice of all. Death is not the end when love is the cause. Her light merged with mine, creating a shield against the darkness that sought to claim me. Lily, now fully restored to her body, stood up from the altar. Her voice, clear and strong, began to sing her mother's favorite hymn. One by one, the other children joined her, their pure voices filling the sanctuary with music that seemed to come from heaven itself. The darkness that had tried to claim me recoiled from the sound. Pastor James, understanding at last, raised his Bible and spoke. Emma's death was a tragedy, but this moment is her redemption. The throne is broken not by loss, but by love freely given. The sacrifice has already been paid on a cross 2,000 years ago. The entity's remaining darkness writhed in agony as this truth was proclaimed. It had sought to corrupt faith through sacrifice, but instead had encountered the power of sacrifice through faith. With a final terrible cry, it dissipated completely, leaving behind only the fading echo of its defeat. I found myself standing whole and alive, with Sarah's spirit on one side and our daughter on the other. The sanctuary erupted in joy as families reunited, children embracing their parents with tears of happiness. The medical team watched in amazement as every trace of the children's ordeal vanished, leaving them healthier and stronger than before. In the months that followed, our community underwent a profound transformation. The divisions that had torn us apart were healed by our shared experience of divine love. The church saw a revival of genuine faith, not based on fear or obligation, but on the understanding that true belief grows stronger when tested by fire. Dr. Richards, forever changed by what he had witnessed, established a foundation dedicated to studying the intersection of faith and science. Pastor James, his heart finally at peace about Emma's death, wrote a book that helped countless other families find healing through faith. Lily grew into her experience with remarkable grace. Rather than being traumatized by the ordeal, she emerged with a deep understanding of God's love that usually takes a lifetime to achieve. She and the other children formed a special bond, using their experience to help others struggling with faith and doubt. Sarah's spirit, though no longer visible to us, remained a tangible presence in our lives. Sometimes in quiet moments we would feel her love surrounding us like a warm embrace. Lily often said she could hear her mother singing along during church services, her voice adding a heavenly harmony to the earthly choir. As for me, my faith was transformed by the experience. I learned that true belief isn't about avoiding doubt, but about choosing to trust even in the darkest moments. The crack in my spiritual armor that had made Lily vulnerable became a source of strength, a reminder that broken faith, when healed by love, becomes unbreakable. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, our community gathers for a special service. We remember not the darkness that tried to claim our children, but the light that saved them. We celebrate not just the victory over evil, but the deeper understanding we gained about the nature of faith itself. The entity's throne, built over centuries of stolen belief, was destroyed not by greater power, but by freely given love. It's a lesson we pass on to our children and grandchildren that perfect faith isn't about never doubting, but about choosing to believe despite those doubts. That true love is stronger than any darkness. That sacrifice given freely has more power than anything taken by force. And sometimes on these anniversary nights, when Lily leads the children's choir in her mother's favorite hymn, people say they can see a soft light surrounding the congregation and hear an extra voice joining in the chorus, a reminder that love, faith, and the human soul are more powerful than any evil that tries to claim them. If this tale of faith, love, and supernatural battle has touched your heart or sparked your thoughts, we invite you to share your own experiences and reflections in the comments below. Has your faith ever been tested in extraordinary ways? Have you witnessed the power of a mother's eternal love? Your story could inspire others facing similar struggles. Support our team's mission to share these powerful narratives by subscribing to our channel, and help spread this message of hope by sharing this video with your loved ones. Don't forget to like this video. Every interaction helps us reach more souls seeking understanding and faith in dark times.